Welcome back. Tonight, I want you to imagine the hush of the forest after sunset where every rustle in the undergrowth seems to follow you, and the silence itself feels alive. These are not just stories of fear, they're whispered memories, real accounts of people who stepped into the woods and came back changed. Settle in. Dim the lights. And let your mind drift into the darkness between the trees as we explore woods horror stories, true unsettling, real encounters that still haunt those who lived them. Let's begin with a story from someone who sought peace in nature and found something entirely different. A quiet solo camping trip turned into a haunting encounter, one that still follows them to this day. Story 1. The Trees Remember. Woods horror stories true. I have never been able to explain what happened in those woods. Even now, years later, when I close my eyes at night, I still hear the wind shifting through the trees in that same strange rhythm, like a whisper that knows my name. It's taken me a long time to talk about it. And even longer to write it down. But since this is a place for woods horror stories true, I suppose this is where mine belongs. I grew up in a quiet part of the country, far enough from town that the nights were pitch black and the stars were the only street lights we had. My family's old farmhouse sat near the edge of a sprawling forest that seemed endless when I was young. It wasn't the kind of place marked on maps, just miles of old-growth pine and birch, thick underbrush, and forgotten trails worn into the soil long before my grandparents were born. People in the area respected the woods. They'd go hunting or hiking during the day, sure, but no one lingered there at night. Not because of bears or wolves, though we had those too, but because of something else. Something older. I'd heard the stories, of course. Every kid in the county had. Tales about voices that lured people off the path, or lights that flickered between the trees, always just out of reach. My grandfather used to say the forest had a memory, and it didn't like to be disturbed. As a teenager, I brushed it off as folklore. But deep down, I always wondered why adults never ventured in after dark. I would find out the answer the summer I turned 23. It was late August, and the air was beginning to change, that faint crispness that signals autumn is coming. A friend of mine, Lucas, had come back from college and suggested we go camping like we used to in high school. We hadn't seen each other in over a year, and I missed those late-night talks under the stars. The idea felt right. We picked a familiar clearing about 2 miles into the woods, a spot we'd camped in dozens of times before without incident. It wasn't far from a small creek, and the ground there was soft and level. We packed light, a tent, a couple of sleeping bags, a lantern, some snacks, and a small hatchet for firewood. We started our hike just before sunset, laughing and talking as the forest swallowed us whole. The air smelled of pine and damp earth, and the golden light filtered gently through the branches. It felt peaceful, almost sacred in a way I'd forgotten. We set up camp as twilight bled into night. A small fire crackled at the center of our clearing, and the woods around us seemed to hum with 1,000 unseen lives. Crickets sang, owls called in the distance, and the breeze wove through the canopy above us like a ghost. It was perfect. We stayed up late, swapping stories and catching up. At some point, Lucas started telling one of the old local legends about a man who had vanished in these woods back in the 1950s. They said his body was never found, but his voice could still be heard calling for help if you listened closely on windless nights. I remember laughing, though something about the way the firelight flickered across Lucas's face made me uneasy. His voice was calm, almost too calm, as he spoke. And when the forest around us suddenly went silent, no insects, no rustle of leaves, nothing, we both noticed. "You hear that?" he whispered. I nodded. The silence pressed against my ears like a weight. It's hard to explain. But when the woods go completely quiet like that, it's not normal. Even in the dead of night, there's always some noise. This was different. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. And then we heard it faint, far away, drifting through the stillness. A voice. "Help!" We froze. It came again, closer this time. "Help me!" At first, I thought maybe it was another camper. But it was nearly midnight, and we hadn't seen a soul on the trail all day. The nearest town was miles away. Who would be out here, calling for help in the dark? "Should we check it out?" Lucas asked. Every instinct in me screamed no. But I also knew we couldn't ignore someone who might be hurt. Against my better judgment, we grabbed our flashlights and followed the sound deeper into the woods. The voice led us away from the clearing and down a narrow deer path I didn't remember being there before. The further we went, the stranger it felt. The air grew colder, the ground softer beneath our boots. The trees seemed to crowd closer together, their branches weaving overhead until the stars disappeared completely. The voice would fade, then return from another direction. "Help! Please!" It was always just ahead, just out of sight. I began to feel like we were being led. After maybe 20 minutes of walking, Lucas stopped abruptly. "We should turn back," he said. "This doesn't feel right." I agreed. But when we turned around, the path behind us was gone. I mean it gone. There was no trail, no footprints, nothing but an endless wall of trees in every direction. I spun in a slow circle, panic rising in my chest. Somehow, we had walked into a part of the forest I didn't recognize at all. That's when the flashlight started flickering. It dimmed, then brightened, then went dark completely. Lucas's light followed seconds later. We were plunged into blackness so complete it felt like a physical thing pressing against our skin. And in that darkness, the forest changed. It's hard to put into words, but everything felt wrong. The air was heavier. The smell of pine and soil had vanished, replaced by something damp and metallic, like old blood. Even the silence had a texture to it, thick and unnatural. Then the voice came again, but it wasn't ahead of us anymore. It was behind us. "Help me!" It was closer than before. Too close. Lucas grabbed my arm. "We need to move." We stumbled forward blindly, hands outstretched, trying to feel our way through the dark. I could hear something moving just beyond the edge of hearing, soft footsteps, deliberate and slow, matching our pace. Every few seconds, the voice would call again, always from a new direction. "Help! Please! Don't leave me!" The words were starting to sound strange. Slurred. Twisted. Like someone imitating human speech rather than speaking it. And then, for the briefest second, the beam of my flashlight sputtered back to life. That's when I saw it. It was standing between two trees about 30 feet ahead, tall and impossibly thin, its limbs too long, its head tilted at an unnatural angle. I couldn't make out a face, but I could feel it watching us. The light died again, and the darkness swallowed it whole. I couldn't breathe. My legs refused to move. Lucas was whispering something, "Go, go, go," but my body wouldn't listen. Then the voice came again, right next to my ear. "Help me." It wasn't a shout. It wasn't even a whisper. It was a breath warm and damp against my skin. I bolted. I don't know how long we ran. Time didn't exist in that darkness. My lungs burned, branches clawed at my arms and face, and the ground seemed to shift beneath my feet like it was alive. All I knew was that something was following us, not running, but gliding silently through the trees, always just behind us. At some point, Lucas shouted my name, and I turned just in time to see him trip and fall. I reached for him, but before I could grab his hand, he was gone. I swear to you, he didn't fall to the ground. He disappeared. One moment he was there, the next he was gone, like the darkness had swallowed him whole. I screamed his name until my throat was raw. No answer. Just the silence and that awful, metallic smell. Somehow, I kept moving. Instinct took over. I stumbled forward until my legs gave out and I collapsed against the roots of a massive tree. My body shook with exhaustion and terror. I don't remember falling asleep, but at some point, everything went black. I woke to birdsong. The morning sun filtered gently through the branches above me, painting the forest floor in shades of gold and green. My flashlight lay beside me, dead but intact. My clothes were torn, my skin scratched, but I was alive. For a moment, I thought maybe it had all been a dream, a vivid nightmare brought on by fear and darkness. But then I saw the clearing. I was lying just a few hundred feet from our campsite. The fire pit was cold, the tent still standing, our gear untouched. It was as if nothing had happened at all. Except Lucas was gone. I searched for hours, calling his name until my voice broke. I followed the creek, climbed ridges, even marked trees as I went, but there was no sign of him. Not a footprint. Not a scrap of fabric. Nothing. By evening, I stumbled out of the woods and called the sheriff's department. A search team was organized. They combed every inch of the forest for 6 days. They found no trace of him. No tracks, no clothing, no body. It was as if he had never entered the woods at all. I told them everything about the voice, the darkness, the thing I saw. They wrote it off as shock, maybe hallucination. The official report says Lucas vanished sometime during the night. Foul play was not suspected. But I know what I experienced. And I know he didn't just vanish. The forest took him. I moved away a year later. I couldn't stand being near those woods anymore. But they never really let me go. I dream about them often, always the same dream. I'm walking through that endless darkness, the voice calling out ahead of me. Help me. And sometimes, just before I wake, I hear another sound too faint, muffled, like someone screaming far, far away. It sounds like Lucas. I've tried to make sense of it over the years. Maybe there's something in that forest we don't understand. Maybe the stories were right, the woods have a memory, and sometimes they remember us too well. I've spoken to others in the area since then, people who've lost friends or family under eerily similar circumstances. One woman told me her uncle vanished in the same forest in 1978 while searching for a missing hiker. She said the search party heard his voice for days after he disappeared, calling for help from places they couldn't reach. They never found him either. I still go back sometimes. I don't know why. Maybe I hope I'll find a clue. Maybe I hope I'll hear Lucas again. Each time, I swear I won't stay past dusk, but somehow the shadows always lengthen faster than I expect. The last time I visited, just before sundown, I stood at the edge of the clearing where we'd camped. The breeze rustled through the branches, and for a moment, everything felt normal. Then the forest went silent. And from somewhere deep among the trees, I heard it, faint but unmistakable. Help! I didn't follow it this time. I turned and walked away, heart pounding, refusing to look back. But I know I'll return. Because part of me is still trapped in those woods, wandering through that darkness, listening to a voice that isn't quite human. And part of me wonders if that's exactly what the forest wants. If you've read this far, maybe you're thinking I imagined it all. Maybe it was panic, exhaustion, the tricks of a tired mind. I've tried to convince myself of that too. But deep down, I know better. Some places remember. And some places don't let go. It's strange, isn't it? How something as vast and empty as a forest can feel like it's watching you. Our next story takes that feeling even further. Two friends set out for a weekend adventure, but when night fell, one of them followed a light that didn't behave like any lantern made by human hands. Story 2: The Lantern in the Pines Woods. Horror stories true. I don't talk about that night much. It's not because I've forgotten I couldn't, even if I tried, but because every time I tell it, something in me shifts. The air feels colder. The shadows seem deeper. And when the wind moves through the trees outside my window, I hear it again, that faint, rhythmic tapping that followed me out of those woods. It's been 15 years since it happened, and I'm still not sure I understand it. But people say writing helps. So here it is, my story. And I swear to you, it's true. I was 19 that summer, working part-time at a state park deep in the northern woods. My job wasn't glamorous, clearing trails, checking campsites, fixing broken signage, but I loved it. I'd always felt at peace among the trees, where the noise of the world faded and time seemed to stretch in slow, drowsy loops. The park was huge, over 30 square miles of thick forest, rocky hills, and hidden streams. Most visitors stuck to the marked trails and picnic areas. But there were other parts deeper, older, that weren't on the maps. Places the rangers didn't like to talk about. They called one of them the Pines, beyond a dense, untouched stretch of forest near the northern boundary. It wasn't technically off limits, but no one had any reason to go there. There were no trails, no campsites, no lookout points. And besides, there were stories. They said people had gone missing there, hikers, hunters, even an experienced ranger decades ago. None were ever found. And though the official reports blamed disorientation or accidents, the older rangers would shake their heads and say, "The pines don't let go." I didn't believe in that sort of thing then. I was young, logical, and certain that every story had an explanation. That's probably why I agreed to go in. It started with a call on a Wednesday afternoon. A man and his teenage daughter had gone missing 2 days earlier. They'd checked into the park office, left for a short hike, and never came back. By the time their car was found abandoned in the northern lot, the search teams had already combed the surrounding trails with no luck. They asked for volunteers to search deeper into the forest. I signed up immediately. We set out in teams of 2. My partner was a quiet older ranger named Mike, who'd worked the park for 30 years. As we walked, he warned me not to wander off, not even a few yards. "The pines like to confuse you," he said. "They change when you're not looking." I laughed, thinking he was joking. But he didn't laugh back. We followed a dry creek bed north, deeper into the unmarked part of the woods. The canopy grew denser, swallowing the sunlight until the world around us dimmed into a greenish twilight. The air smelled older here: damp moss, decaying wood, the faint tang of iron. For hours, we found nothing. No footprints. No dropped gear. No sign of anyone at all. By late afternoon, we decided to turn back before dark. And that's when we saw the light. It flickered faintly between the trees to our left, warm and golden, like a lantern swaying gently in the distance. Mike stopped dead in his tracks. "We should go," he said quietly. I frowned. It could be them. Maybe they built a fire. His jaw tightened. "No one's supposed to be here." But before I could argue, the light vanished. We stood there for a long time, listening. The forest was silent, too silent. No birdsong, no rustling leaves, not even the distant hum of insects. Just the heavy, waiting stillness that I would come to dread. Then the light appeared again. Closer this time. Without thinking, I started toward it. Mike grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't," he hissed. "That's not them." His words sent a shiver through me. "What do you mean?" He shook his head. "We're leaving." But I couldn't let it go. The missing pair could be hurt, disoriented. That light might be their only chance. Against Mike's protests, I took a step forward, then another. The lantern bobbed once, almost like it was waiting for me, and drifted deeper into the trees. I followed. The forest changed as I walked. I didn't notice it at first, just small things. The ground sloped slightly downward, the soil softer underfoot. The pines seemed taller, older, their trunks thick and twisted. The air grew colder too, and the silence deepened until my own breathing sounded unnaturally loud. The light moved steadily ahead, always just far enough to stay out of reach. Every now and then it would pause, sway gently, and continue on as if leading me somewhere. I don't know how long I followed it. Time didn't feel real in that place. But eventually, I realized I couldn't hear Mike calling my name anymore. I turned around, expecting to see him right behind me. There was nothing. No trail. No footprints. No sign of how I'd come. Just a wall of identical trees stretching endlessly in every direction. And the lantern, glowing patiently ahead. I thought about turning back, but back where? Every direction looked the same. Panic bubbled in my chest, and the cold air burned my lungs. I called out for Mike, for anyone. Silence. Then, somewhere far behind me, a sound, a soft, rhythmic tap, tap, tap. It was faint, but it was moving closer. I don't know why, but that sound filled me with a dread deeper than anything I'd ever felt. It wasn't footsteps. It wasn't an animal. It was too deliberate, too patient. I ran toward the light. The trees grew denser as I pushed forward, branches clawing at my arms and face. The ground felt wrong under my boots, spongy and uneven, as though I were walking on something hollow. The tapping followed me, steady and relentless, never speeding up, never slowing down. Then the light stopped. It hovered in a small clearing up ahead, suspended a few feet above the ground. As I stepped into the open space, the first thing I noticed was the smell: damp earth and something faintly sweet, like rot beneath the soil. The second thing I noticed was the tree. It stood alone at the center of the clearing, massive, ancient, its bark dark as charcoal. Its trunk split into two thick limbs about 10 feet up, forming a crude Y shape. And hanging from that split, swaying gently in the still air, was the lantern. Only, there was no hook. No rope. Nothing holding it in place. It floated. I stared, heart pounding. And then, from somewhere deep within the tree, I heard it. Tap, tap, tap. Slow, deliberate, echoing through the wood. I took a step back. The tree exhaled. I swear to you, it breathed. A slow, deep breath that stirred the leaves around it and carried that same sweet, rotting scent. And as it did, I realized the tapping wasn't coming from inside the trunk at all. It was coming from beneath my feet. I stumbled backward, scanning the ground, and that's when I saw them. Dozens of small, half-buried objects scattered through the clearing. At first, I thought they were rocks. But then I looked closer. They were bones. Some animal, some human. All bleached pale and worn smooth with age. And among them, tangled in the roots of the tree, something glinted in the dim light. A silver locket. I knelt and brushed the dirt away. Inside was a faded photo of a man and a teenage girl, the missing hikers. My hands began to shake. That's when the lantern went out. The clearing plunged into darkness. The air grew colder, so cold I could see my breath. And from somewhere beneath me, the tapping grew louder. Tap, 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 tap. It was all around now, circling me, closing in. I stumbled backward, tripping over roots and bones, clawing my way toward the trees. But the forest wasn't the same anymore. The trunks were closer together, twisted into grotesque shapes that blocked every direction. No matter where I turned, there was no path out, only walls of wood and shadow. And then, from the darkness above, a voice. Help us! It wasn't a scream. It wasn't even loud. But it was filled with such sorrow, such hopelessness, that I felt my knees weaken. Help us! It came again, from behind me this time. Then from the left. Then the right. Dozens of voices. Hundreds. All around me. Help us! Please! We're still here. I clamped my hands over my ears, but the voices grew louder, overlapping, pleading. And beneath it all, the steady tapping, faster now, almost frantic. Tap 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 tap. Something moved in the darkness. I didn't see it not clearly. Just the suggestion of movement between the trees, tall and spindly, too many joints bending the wrong way. It circled me slowly, never stepping into the clearing, never revealing itself. The voices rose to a crescendo. The air vibrated with them, heavy and electric. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, everything stopped. The tapping. The voices. The movement. Silence. I opened my eyes. I was standing at the edge of the marked trail, less than half a mile from the ranger station. They said they found me wandering just after sunrise, covered in scratches, eyes wild, repeating the same words over and over, "They're still there." I don't remember leaving the clearing. I don't remember the lantern going out. One moment I was surrounded by darkness and bones, and the next, I was back where I started. The search was called off a week later. No trace of the missing hikers was ever found. I tried to tell them what I'd seen: the lantern, the tree, the bones, but no one believed me. They said I'd gotten lost, dehydrated, disoriented. They said the forest had played tricks on me. Maybe they're right. But there's one thing they couldn't explain. The locket I'd found, the one with the photo of the missing man and his daughter, was in my pocket when they found me. I still have it. I quit the job a month later. I moved to the city, far from any forests. But no matter how far I go, I still dream of that clearing. I still hear the tapping beneath the earth. And sometimes, late at night, when the world is silent and I'm half asleep, I see that faint golden glow moving through the darkness, swaying gently, waiting for me to follow. I don't know what's in the pines beyond. I don't know if it's alive, or ancient, or something we don't even have words for. But I know it's still there. And I know it remembers me. If you take anything from this story, let it be this: if you ever find yourself walking in the deep woods and you see a light that shouldn't be there, don't follow it. Don't listen to the voices. Don't let the tapping draw you in. Because once the forest notices you, it never really lets you go. Sometimes, the most terrifying stories don't happen to seasoned hikers or solo adventurers. Sometimes, they happen to kids exploring a place they thought was harmless. Our final story tonight is a memory that's lingered for decades: a summer afternoon in the woods that ended with a mystery still unsolved. Story 3: The Path That Wasn't There. Woods Horror Stories True. I never used to be afraid of the woods. I grew up with them in my backyard, endless miles of pine and maple that I treated like my own private world. They were where I built forts with my brother, where I camped with friends, where I went to think when everything else felt too loud. But now, even a glimpse of a treeline makes my heart beat faster. Because I know what waits in there. And I wouldn't wish that knowledge on anyone. This is my story. And I promise you, every word of it is true. It happened 5 years ago, in early October. The air was cool but not cold, the leaves just starting to turn. It was the kind of crisp, perfect weather that practically begged you to go outside. My friend Jamie had just gotten a new camera and wanted to shoot some nature photos for her portfolio. She asked if I'd come with her to a place I knew well, a stretch of old forest about an hour from town, full of mossy ravines, hidden creeks, and towering trees. I'd been there dozens of times growing up, and I agreed without hesitation. We packed light a backpack with water, snacks, and a first aid kit and drove out early that Saturday. The sky was a flawless blue, the morning sun spilling golden light across the fields as we followed the narrow dirt road to the trailhead. From the moment we stepped into the woods, everything felt right. Peaceful. The kind of stillness that settles deep into your chest. The path was soft with fallen leaves, and every breath smelled like damp earth and pine sap. Jamie walked ahead, snapping photos of mushrooms, fallen logs, the way sunlight filtered through the canopy. "Feels like we've got the whole world to ourselves," she said. And we did. Or at least, we thought we did. We followed the main trail for about an hour before branching off onto a narrow side path that led deeper into the forest. It wasn't an official trail, just an old deer run I'd followed before. It wound through a series of shallow valleys and eventually curved back toward the main route. Or at least, it always had before. But that day, something was different. After maybe 20 minutes of walking, I noticed the terrain didn't look familiar. The ground dipped sharply, the trees grew denser, and the sunlight dimmed until everything around us was tinted green and gold. Jamie didn't seem concerned, if anything, she was thrilled. "This is perfect," she said, adjusting her camera. "I've never seen light like this." We kept going. And then, after another 10 minutes, the path simply ended. It wasn't gradual. One moment we were walking on a clear trail, and the next, we were staring into a wall of tangled brush and undergrowth. It looked untouched, like no one had ever set foot there. I frowned and glanced behind us. The path we'd been following was gone. Not overgrown, not hidden, gone. There was nothing but the same dense, unbroken underbrush stretching back the way we'd come. Jamie noticed it too. "Wait, where's the trail?" I laughed nervously. "It's gotta be here." Maybe we veered off a little. We pushed through the brush for a while, trying to find our way back, but the deeper we went, the stranger things became. The trees all looked the same, tall, straight, evenly spaced, like they'd been planted in perfect rows. The air grew colder, heavier, and the forest sounds, the birds, the wind faded until the only thing I could hear was the crunch of our boots on the leaf litter. And then the compass on my watch stopped working. The needle spun lazily, never settling. Jamie's phone had no signal. The GPS app just blinked uselessly, the map stuck at a frozen blue dot. That's when I felt the first twinge of fear. "We should go back the way we came," I said. Jamie nodded, and we turned around. But after 15 minutes of walking, we found ourselves back at the same spot, the same wall of brush, the same evenly spaced trees, the same faint patch of moss I'd noticed on a nearby trunk. It didn't make sense. We'd gone straight. We hadn't turned once. Jamie laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Okay, that's weird." We tried again. This time we veered left, then right. We marked trees with bits of cloth from my pack, thinking it would help us keep track. But every time, no matter which direction we took, we ended up in the same place. It was like the forest was folding in on itself. like it didn't want us to leave. We stopped to rest on a fallen log. The silence was suffocating now, no wind, no birds, not even the distant hum of insects. Just the sound of our breathing and the faint creak of the trees shifting above us. "I don't like this," Jamie whispered. I didn't either. There was something wrong here, something I couldn't name. The air felt thicker, heavier. It pressed against my chest and made it hard to breathe. And then I realized something else. The forest smelled different. It wasn't the earthy, pine-sweet scent of a normal woods. This was sharp, metallic. Like wet iron. Like blood. "Do you smell that?" I asked. Jamie nodded, her face pale. "Yeah." "What is that?" Before I could answer, a sound echoed through the trees. A slow, deliberate crack. Like a heavy branch snapping underfoot. Then another crack. Closer this time. We stared into the trees, hearts pounding. At first, I thought it was an animal, a deer, maybe, or a bear. But the footsteps were too heavy. Too rhythmic. And they stopped the moment we stopped moving. "Hello?" Jamie called. Silence. We waited. Nothing. No footsteps, no sound at all. "Probably just a deer," I said, though I didn't believe it. We started walking again, picking a new direction at random. After a few minutes, I glanced behind us and my blood turned to ice. There, about 30 feet back, was a tree I didn't recognize. It was massive, thicker than any tree I'd ever seen, its bark gnarled and dark, almost black. And at its base, arranged in a neat circle, were stones I could have sworn weren't there before. Jamie saw it too. Was that there a minute ago? I shook my head. No. And then we heard it, the same crack, closer now. Followed by another. And another. Something was walking toward us. We ran. Branches whipped our faces, roots snagged our feet, but we didn't stop. We crashed through the brush, desperate for any sign of the trail, the road, anything familiar. But the forest only grew denser, darker, stranger. At one point, I glanced to my left and saw a tree split cleanly down the middle, its insides hollow and blackened as though it had been burned from within. The footsteps followed us the whole time, slow, steady, never rushing. Always close. Always behind. And then, without warning, the ground vanished. I stumbled forward and landed hard on my knees. We were standing in a clearing, a wide, perfect circle of earth surrounded by towering trees. The ground was bare, stripped of leaves or plants. And at the center stood a single wooden structure. A door. Just a door. Standing upright, unattached to any wall or frame. Weathered, old, its paint peeling away. A rusted iron handle glinted faintly in the dim light. Jamie stared. "What the hell is that?" I didn't answer. Because I had noticed something else. There were carvings in the trees around us, deep gouges that formed symbols I didn't recognize. Spirals. Crossed lines. Shapes that made my stomach twist just to look at them. And then the footsteps stopped. Silence. For a long moment, nothing moved. Then, slowly, the air grew colder. The metallic scent intensified until it was all I could taste. And from somewhere just beyond the tree line, I heard it. A voice. It was faint at first, like a whisper carried on the wind. But it grew clearer with each word. Don't open it. Jamie grabbed my arm. Did you hear that? I nodded, my mouth dry. Yeah. Who's there? She shouted. No reply. Just the stillness, heavy and absolute. Don't open it. This time, the voice was closer. Softer. It sounded like it was right behind the door. Jamie stepped forward. Don't, I hissed, but she didn't stop. She reached out, her fingers trembling, and touched the handle. The moment she did, everything changed. The forest moved. I felt it a shift, deep and seismic, as though the ground itself had taken a breath. The trees seemed to lean inward, their branches creaking like bones. The air grew thick, heavy, almost liquid. And beneath my feet, the earth pulsed slow and rhythmic, like the beating of a colossal heart. Jamie jerked her hand back, eyes wide. What was that? I didn't know. But something inside me screamed that we shouldn't be there. That we weren't supposed to see this. And then the voice spoke again, louder now, all around us, echoing from the trees themselves. Leave. The wind roared through the clearing, whipping leaves and dust into a spiral. The ground bucked beneath us, and a deep, resonant sound like the groan of ancient wood echoed from the door. And just like that, we were somewhere else. I don't remember falling. I don't remember running. I only remember hitting the ground hard and looking up to see sunlight streaming through the trees. We were standing on the main trail. The real one. The air was warm again. Birds were singing. The metallic scent was gone. Jamie and I stared at each other, too stunned to speak. My watch compass was working again. Her phone had signal. And when I checked the time, it was nearly sunset. We had been gone for almost 8 hours. But to me, it had felt like maybe 2. We stumbled back to the trailhead and drove home in silence. Neither of us spoke about what happened, not that night, not in the days that followed. And though we remained friends, we never went back to those woods. 2 weeks later, Jamie sent me a photo she'd taken that day, a shot of sunlight filtering through the trees. It was beautiful. Peaceful. Ordinary. But in the bottom corner, barely visible in the shadows, was something else. A door. Standing alone among the trees. I've spent years trying to make sense of it. I've searched maps, historical records, anything that might explain what we found. But there's nothing, no sign of old structures, no record of disappearances, nothing unusual about that forest at all. Still, I know what I saw. And I know this, there are places in the woods that don't follow our rules. Paths that appear when they shouldn't. Trails that vanish behind you. Doors that lead nowhere or everywhere. And if you ever find yourself in one of those places, remember what I learned that day. Some doors aren't meant to be opened. Some paths aren't meant to be followed. And once the woods decide you've seen too much, they never really let you go. The woods hold more than trees and shadows. They hold echoes of footsteps that never stop, of whispers that follow the wind, of figures that wait just beyond the edge of sight. These were Wood's horror stories, true, unsettling glimpses into the darker side of nature and reminders that some places aren't meant to be explored. If you enjoyed tonight's stories, remember to subscribe for more haunting tales to fall asleep to, and until next time, sleep well and maybe keep the forest at a distance.